On the eve of the wedding, I accidentally discovered a spreadsheet on my fiancée's computer named Backup Plan. It was filled with information about different men. In my column, it said, a simple and honest man, suitable for marriage, but in the column of her first love, it said, you are an eagle, meant to soar across the vast sky. She said she couldn't marry him because she had never touched housework in her life, never endured the dust of daily chores. After marriage, her husband must hand over his full salary and do all the household work. She couldn't bear to ask that of him, and yet, after knowing she loved someone else, I only felt relieved, because Freya didn't know. I also had a form. It was an application to transfer to Africa as a war correspondent, because the one I truly love is there. I must go and find her. Chapter 1. You're going back to be a war correspondent. That morning, a sudden exclamation rang out in the TV station. I handed over my transfer application form. I nodded and said, yes, I want to be stationed in Congo-Kinshasa. The station director said, George. He was silent for a long moment, then continued, you were indeed born for war reporting. Everyone saw that 3 years ago. But now, you're just about to get married. You're still on wedding leave, going to such a dangerous place. Will your wife even agree? I was silent for a second, then shrugged and said, I'm not getting married anymore. What? Under the station director's stunned gaze, I firmly said, I won't be getting married. Yesterday, Freya went out shopping and asked me to send her the grocery list from her computer. On the computer, there were 2 spreadsheets. One was the wedding plan, and the other was called Rebound List. By some impulse, I clicked on the Rebound List, and I found it was her backup record. 6 men, each carefully detailed with job, assets, and personality. Mine was on the very first page. Name, George. Family background, orphan. Simple social ties. Personality, honest, reliable, emotionally stable. Remarks, hands over full salary. Does all household chores. Hard-working laborer. At the end, she highlighted a few words in yellow. Suitable to be the rebound guy. My brows furrowed. After pausing for a few seconds, I continued flipping. The others all had similar comments. Stingy, not considered. Too addicted to games, not considered. Not romantic, not considered. But the last sheet, except for the name and photo, it was completely blank. Only one remark line read, you are an eagle, meant to soar across the vast sky. His name was Makoto. Chapter 2. I remembered, when we were finalizing the guest list, Freya hesitated over this name. She added it a few times, then deleted it. I asked her the reason, and she said he was traveling around the world and probably wouldn't come back just for this. So, it was her first love. Freya's WeChat was still logged in on the computer. I found Makoto. Their chat history had been wiped clean, but his latest post read, damn it, the one I love is getting married. I'm going to smash the axle of her wedding car and crash the ceremony. Freya replied below, even if you try to stop it, it's useless. I won't marry you. Makoto replied. What the hell? So you've really found your true love this time, huh? Freya commented. What are you talking about? Makoto answered again, forget it. Your family is a bottomless pit, and I'm not interested in doing charity. The bride price is sky high, 20 million up front. They think I'm some fool to be ripped off. What? So if I'm poor, it's a fixed number, but if I'm rich, it scales like a percentage attack. Then I can't afford to marry you. Besides, I'm too used to living free and unrestrained. I can't give you the life you want. My journey is toward the stars and the sea. Freya wrote, yes, I know. That's why I'm marrying the one they want me to marry. I couldn't bear to let you do all that for me. Chapter 3. Couldn't bear to. Hearing those words come out of Freya's mouth was truly rare. I met Freya through a blind date. She was young, beautiful, with a stable career, an associate chief physician at a top-tier hospital. But because of her difficult parents, she had never been able to marry. Their control was extreme. They wanted her to marry a local, someone willing to pay a high bride price, and also someone capable of pleasing them and providing for their old age. The first time I visited their home, her father tested me by scolding me for arriving late and ordered me to drink 3 glasses of liquor as punishment because I had poor tolerance and declined after a few sips. He laughed in front of everyone at the table and asked mockingly, so, who's the father-in-law here, really? After dinner, he made me wash all the dishes alone, saying he had never let his daughter do chores. So after marriage, all the housework would fall on me, and I endured it all, because the moment I first saw Freya, I thought, for that face, I'll do anything. We dated for 2 years. Her parents were very satisfied with me, and Freya gradually got used to my care, the always hot meals, the spotless home. She was free to maintain her old lifestyle, traveling around, checking into scenic spots, getting regular massages and spa treatments, but her attitude toward me was always lukewarm, until her birthday this year, when I wanted to bake her a cake myself. The oven exploded during preheating, when she rushed to the hospital and saw my arm covered with shards of glass. For the first time she panicked, threw herself into my arms, and trembled, saying, "You don't have to do so much for me, it's okay if you don't." But even then, she never once truly felt heartache for me, never once said she couldn't bear to see me suffer. Later, she agreed to my proposal. I thought maybe there was some real feeling, that she was willing to walk with me, but it turned out, she only did it to satisfy her parents' wishes. Makoto was the one she loved so much she chose to give him up. The moment I saw their conversation, I was relieved. She had been acting for her parents, and I had been acting for myself, but no matter how good the acting was, it was still only a play. Chapter 4. When I returned home from the TV station, I dug out a few old camera bags from the back of the bookshelf. They were buried memories. The feel of the camera shells had become unfamiliar, and the batteries were long dried out. While waiting for the chargers to bring them back to life, I inserted the memory cards into my computer and opened those long sealed photos. The first, women on the street waiting for cholera pills. The second, a 5-year-old child soldier, shorter than the gun he held. The third, refugees living in shattered tents. The smell of smoke and dust pierced through time. My heart felt as though seized by sharp talons. I leaned back in the chair, trying to calm my racing pulse, and let out a bitter laugh. I wondered, if Freya saw these photos, would she still write, "honest and simple men," in the personality column about me? Just as I was thinking that, my phone buzzed twice. It was a message from her. She sent the location of a restaurant. I suddenly remembered, we were supposed to have a small gathering tonight with the bridesmaids and groomsmen. I had few relatives or friends, so they were all Freya's circle, but I knew this was only an excuse, because today, Makoto had returned to the country. Chapter 5. When I arrived at the restaurant, they had already ordered the dishes. Next to Freya sat Makoto. There was no seat left for me. When Makoto saw me, he looked me over with amusement, then said, "Go grab yourself a chair, sit wherever." I sat at the farthest spot from them. Throughout, Freya only quietly watched everything. Without saying a single word, someone asked, "Makoto, we thought you wouldn't come back this time." Makoto laughed. "Are you kidding? This is my sister Freya's wedding. Even if I had to crawl, I'd make it back. I had to see what kind of guy she's marrying." Several people exchanged meaningful glances. One of them said, "That's true enough. You two have never been ordinary friends." Then they began asking Makoto about his travels. By the time the dishes arrived, he had already finished telling stories of catching yellowfin tuna in the Mediterranean, walking the pilgrimage road in Portugal, and climbing Uluru in Australia. The eyes of those girls were glowing. One of them exclaimed, "Makoto, you've actually been to so many places." Makoto smiled and said, "Hey, that's just my everyday life. I'm not one of those mediocre people chasing after a wife, children, and a warm bed. That's too pitiful. People should go out and broaden their horizons. The reason the bottom of society stays at the bottom is because they lack vision and ambition." Chapter 6. With the wine warming their faces, he was the center of attention, and Freya, sitting beside him, spoke little, but the way she looked at him from time to time grew so tender it was almost dripping. I silently finished half a cup of white liquor. The burn at the base of my tongue was bitter. Everything felt tasteless. Makoto was telling his story about dealing with con artists in Egypt. Then suddenly he turned, smiled, and asked Freya, "Do you want to know how to say 'darling' in Arabic?" Freya froze for a moment, then shook her head. Makoto raised his eyebrows. "I'll teach you." He leaned in close, his lips curled into a smirk. "Abibti." Freya blushed, shyly pushed him away, her cheeks red. She scolded lightly, "Sit farther away," but Makoto said, "Come on, repeat after me, Ababi." Unable to withstand his relentless coaxing, Freya bit her lip and finally gave in. "Ababi." Makoto laughed. "Excellent." Then he said, "That's right, I'm your Ababi, and you're my Abibti." Just as I shook my head speechlessly, Makoto noticed. His eyes flickered, and suddenly he looked at me. He asked, "Have you ever been to Africa?" Chapter 7. Someone immediately sneered. "Does he look like it? Africa? He probably hardly even leaves the province." Even Freya gave a mocking smile and shook her head. Makoto narrowed his eyes. Wearing an expression of victory, he said, "That's true. I asked the wrong person. What I should have asked is whether he's been laid off yet, or if his mortgage is still unpaid." The table burst into laughter. He turned his head away and launched into another topic. I slowly clenched my fists. I thought, perhaps I was a little drunk. Otherwise, why would I feel anger over such a cheap provocation? I said, "I've been there." The table fell slightly quieter. Makoto frowned. "What?" I repeated. "I've been to Africa." A flash of surprise crossed his face, but quickly turned to disdain. He sneered. "Oh please, no need to pretend. If you haven't been, you haven't been." Lying is bad, you'll get exposed easily, I said calmly. I'm not lying, he chuckled. Then tell us, where? Kenya, Morocco. Don't tell me South Africa. His arrogance was written all over his face, as if certain I'd fail to answer. I stared at him and said, Congo-Kinshasa. Chapter 8. The air suddenly grew still. Someone muttered. Where? Congo-Kinshasa. Where's that? Another scoffed. He must be drunk, making things up like that. Ha ha. Yet another said. What kind of normal person would go to such a poor, chaotic place? The fire inside me blazed higher. There, besides me, were many others too. Doctors Without Borders, UN peacekeepers, aid engineers. Were they not normal people either? I said. Not only have I been there, I stayed for an entire year. I saw them fighting wars over mineral resources. I went to Ebola treatment centers. I distributed food with UN staff, I added. I even took a bullet. The whole table fell into silence. Everyone's mouths hung open. And one more thing. I swirled the wine in my glass. I said. There are no yellowfin tuna in the Mediterranean, they prefer tropical waters. The pilgrimage road doesn't start in Portugal, it runs from France to Spain. And Uluru has been banned from climbing since 2019. I narrowed my eyes and said. Makoto, lying is bad. It's very easy to get exposed. Chapter 9. His face instantly turned pale. The crowd's puzzled, bewildered gazes shifted back and forth between us. Makoto suddenly stood up, voice fierce but weak at its core. He's an orphan with no parents. How could he possibly have gone to those places? He's the one lying. I rubbed my chin and smiled. Then why don't you show everyone the photos? If you've been to so many places, surely you must have taken a few pictures, right? He stammered. I forgot. I asked. Don't tell me you don't have any. His panic grew. He turned to Freya and said. Freya, what's wrong with your husband? Isn't today supposed to be my welcome back dinner? Why is he targeting me at every turn? Forget it. Since I'm so unwelcome, I'll just leave. With that, he kicked his chair aside and stormed out. The room instantly fell into chaos. One girl exclaimed anxiously. Makoto drove here, and he drank so much. What if something happens? The next second, Freya shot me an angry glare and hurried out after him. The others quickly followed. Someone said. George, we're leaving too. Another whispered under their breath. This guy has no shame. Doesn't he realize he's the one stealing someone else's love? A different voice added. He just couldn't stand that Makoto has money and experience while he himself has nothing. That's why he snapped. And another sneered. He made things hard for Makoto. And in the end his wife walked out with someone else. How stupid can you get? Their mocking voices faded as they left. In the huge private room, I was suddenly the only one left. I let out a soundless laugh, then poured myself another glass of liquor, tilted back my head and drained it. Chapter 10. In truth, Makoto wasn't wrong. I really hadn't been to those places. But the reason I knew he was lying was because of my mother. I wasn't born without parents. My mother had been an international journalist. Later, she was stationed long-term in war zones and rarely came home. So the neighbors always mocked me. Your mom abandoned you. I clenched my fists and fought them, fiercely defending the dignity of a child, only to be laughed at even more cruelly. As a boy, seeing her even once was rare, but she often sent letters with stamps from all over the world. She wrote in detail about her life abroad, always enclosing photos. My happiest childhood memories were sitting on my father's lap, listening to him read her letters, while I painted the image of that bold, heroic journalist in my heart. She once wrote, George, most people's world is small, but the real world is vast. When you grow up, you must go and see it yourself, only then will you know what it is you truly want. She was my eyes. At an age when I had hardly read any books, I caught fleeting glimpses of the world through her, but when I was 5 years old, she died in the line of duty, murdered for exposing injustice in war. The newspaper could only recover her camera. Inside, besides the precious images she had protected with her life, there was also a photo of me. I don't know when she took it. Back then, I didn't fully understand what murdered meant, but those same people who used to gossip at our doorstep smirked and said, see, people who love showing off never meet a good end. From then on, I lost my mother, but I never forgot her advice. Go see the world with your own eyes. Record it yourself. Only then will you know what you truly want. This afternoon, the oldest, most worn camera I dug out was hers. The heat of the alcohol surged to my head, and dizziness blurred my vision. I buried my face in my hands. Mom, I miss you so much. Chapter 11. The next morning, a headache woke me. I peeled my eyes open, dazed for a while before realizing the ceiling above me was my own. I had no idea how I'd gotten home last night. I got up and poured a cup of warm water. Freya was sitting in the living room, her face cold as ice. You handle things like this, she said. I didn't want to deal with her. I turned and walked to the study, but the desk was empty. My throat hoarse, I asked, "Where's my camera?" She said, "I gave it to Makoto." I spun around. She rolled her eyes. "Weren't you the one who told him to take a few more photos?" she said. My brain struggled to parse each word coming from Freya's mouth. She had given my mother's camera to Makoto. I smashed the water cup. I grabbed her by the collar, teeth clenched, snarling. "How dare you touch my camera? How dare you?" Freya was terrified. My face darkened. "Where is Makoto now?" I demanded. She said, "George, let go. I'm asking you, where is he?" I hauled her up and pinned her against the wall, my grip tightening. The alcohol from last night turned into anger that surged from my chest. Freya froze. Her voice trembled. "He's at the Blue Sky Hotel. Room number." She answered, 1103. I let her go and slammed out the door. I drove straight to the hotel. I stormed up to the 11th floor and kicked the door in hard. "Get out," I shouted. After a moment, Makoto opened the door, furious. "What the hell are you doing acting crazy this early?" he barked. I pushed past him. Sure enough, the camera sat on the TV stand in the room. I grabbed it to leave, and Makoto lunged and tried to stop me. "This was a gift from Freya," he shouted. "Who are you to take it?" Then, slap. I turned and slapped him hard across the face. "This is my property. How dare you take it?" I shouted. He was stunned, then yelled, "You hit me." He rushed at me and we wrestled. "He's such a bastard," he spat. "You stole my woman, and now you want to steal the things she gives me too." In the scuffle, the fragile camera strap was torn. He grabbed the body and slammed it to the floor with a vicious throw. There was a loud crack. My mind went blank. The camera shattered into pieces before me. Chapter 12. Makoto's eyes flashed with smug triumph. "If I can't have it, neither can you," he said. A wave of despair and fury crashed over me. I grabbed Makoto by the head and rammed him against the wall with everything I had. With one smash, he bled. He screamed, "Help, he's killing me." The hotel room door was flung open. Freya burst in. Seeing Makoto's state, she panicked. "George, are you insane?" Makoto clutched his forehead, legs trembling. "Call the police. Freya, call the police." I shoved him aside and fell to my knees. With trembling hands I tried to assemble the broken pieces. I didn't care that my fingertips were cut by glass. No matter how I pieced them together, it wasn't right. Freya grabbed my hand. "Calm down. It's shattered, can't be put back together," she said. I shuddered violently. An itch rose in my throat. She snapped at me. "Look at you, so pathetic. It's just a broken camera. Buy a new one. Is this really worth it?" I bit my lip until it split. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. A broken camera. It was my mother's only keepsake, and she treated it like some useless piece of junk. I looked up, my hatred barely contained. I slapped Freya hard. My bloody fingertips smeared across her face. Through gritted teeth I said, "Freya, get out. Get out of here." In her horrified eyes, I forced her hand and ripped the ring from her finger, flinging it hard out the window. Chapter 13. I returned to my hometown, to see my mother. I sat in front of her gravestone for an entire day. During that time, Freya called me countless times. I didn't answer, I blocked her. Sometimes, shame would eat at me. If my mother could see what I had become these past few years, would she be disappointed? I had failed her expectations. I hadn't grown into someone strong and brave. Instead, I wasted 3 years of my life over a woman like Freya. On the third day, I went to the cemetery as usual, but this time, beside the gravestone, I saw something unexpected. It was a pot of bird of paradise flowers. My heart began pounding. That had been my mother's favorite flower. Who had come here? I turned and ran to the cemetery office to ask. They told me that every few months, someone would bring one. Then they gave me an address. I had an answer in my heart, but I dared not believe it. Following the address, I found a flower shop. From the owner, I learned, about 3 years ago, she had received an order. Every 3 months, she was to deliver a pot of bird of paradise to Ms. Wang's grave, because the person who placed the order was very beautiful. The owner remembered her clearly. My heart nearly leapt from my throat. I asked, "Do you know who this person was?" The owner flipped through the records and said, "Her surname was Lu. Her name was Willow." Chapter 14. She added, "But we haven't been able to reach her for a long time. At one point, there was a supply problem. We tried to ask if we could deliver a different flower, but she never replied. Do you know her?" The shopkeeper looked up at me, and then her expression turned uneasy. "Sir, are you all right?" I rubbed my sore eyes and waved a hand. I'm fine. The shopkeeper was kind. She invited me to sit, poured me a cup of tea, then turned to tend the flowers. I sat in the shop, quiet for a long while. At last, I chose a bouquet of my mother's favorite daisies and prepared to leave. Just as I was about to pay, the owner suddenly stopped me. She said, "This bouquet is free." I was taken aback. Her face softened with memory. She said, "Sir, I just remembered, back then. Willow also said that one day, someone might come to ask about this order. If he comes alone," she said, "please let him take a bouquet of flowers. And tell him, keep walking forward, the starlight will illuminate your path." Chapter 15. That day, I wept in front of my mother's grave until I was a mess. I never thought she would appear beside me in such a way. What kind of mental preparation had she made, to leave such a message with the florist? Only I understood what, if he comes alone, truly meant. It meant, she would no longer be by my side. At dusk, a colleague called me. "George, the ticket is booked for next week. This time, who do you want as the beneficiary for your life insurance? Your wife?" I shook my head. "Please put Doctors Without Borders." He asked, "Doctors Without Borders?" I said, "Yes. Why would you choose them?" I drew in a deep breath, because she had been with Doctors Without Borders. Stumbling out of the cemetery gates, I suddenly saw an unexpected figure. It was Freya, dark circles under her eyes, her face haggard. She said nothing when she saw me, just handed me a box. Inside lay a camera, the exact same model as my mother's. Biting her lip, she said, "The original one, it really couldn't be repaired." We looked at each other in silence. I didn't know how she had found me, nor how she had managed to track down a camera from 1994, but the thing I had treasured was already broken. Even if someone found me an identical one, what meaning would it hold? Seeing I didn't take it, her tone grew impatient. "George, did you change the lock code? I couldn't even get into the house. Are you seriously not planning to marry me anymore? The wedding's next week. The invitations are all sent out. Can't you grow up a little and stop being so impulsive?" Chapter 16. I felt it was all meaningless. I asked, "So in your eyes, I'm just being impulsive?" She looked up at me, her voice softer. "George, I know you're doing this because you love me. You're jealous, thinking I like Makoto. That's why you got so upset when I gave him your camera. But that's because he's vindictive. He said he wanted revenge on you. And you know, Makoto's family is wealthy. We can't afford to provoke him. That's why I made the decision myself to give him the camera." She added, "Husband, you really need to change your temper. Once we have a family, have children, you must learn to think of the consequences before acting." Suddenly, a wave of pity for the woman before me welled up. I said, "Freya, I don't love you." She froze. Then her face turned cold. "Stop lying. If you didn't love me, why do you always look at me that way?" I chuckled lightly, raised my hand, and stroked her face one last time. What a pity. Soon I'll never see this face again. As if realizing something, her expression shifted sharply. "What do you mean by that?" But then her phone rang. It was Makoto. She hesitated a few seconds, then answered. On the other end, his voice was hollow and broken. "Freya, then I'll go. Tell George the first was wrong too. I caused trouble for both of you. I'm sorry. I just couldn't stop being jealous of him." Freya asked, "Makoto, where are you going?" He sighed. "Don't come to see me off. We shouldn't meet again. Go back to George. You two are the ones meant to spend a lifetime together." Freya's voice grew frantic. "Makoto." The call cut off. She shoved the box into my arms and turned away. I watched her figure disappear down the street. How laughable. I lifted my hand, tossed the camera straight into a trash bin. I'd be leaving soon anyway. Useless things need not be carried along. Chapter 17. The following week, I was swamped, training my body, practicing languages, finalizing topics, contacting local guides. Meanwhile, Freya kept sending me messages from different numbers. "George, what did you mean that day? Don't we still have things to talk about? About that night, Makoto already apologized to you. Where are you now?" I didn't reply to a single one. The day before I left, she asked again. "Tomorrow is the wedding. Where are you?" I snapped the SIM card in two, dragging my suitcase behind me. I headed for the airport without looking back. When dawn lit the cabin window, the plane took off. There were no direct flights from Beijing to my destination. I had to transfer in Cairo, nearly 20 hours in total, long enough for me to relive old memories. I pulled down the eye mask the stewardess had handed me, and whispered to myself, "Willow, I'm coming back." Chapter 18. The first time I met Willow was in a refugee camp. At the time, the situation in the east was chaos. Armed groups, fighting over minerals, tribal grudges, and more. Raided villages. Hundreds of thousands were forced from their homes to seek refuge in the cities. When I arrived at the camp, several doctors were treating a little girl. She'd been caught in an explosion. A tiny stone was lodged in her ear. The girl struggled violently, making the doctors afraid to try removing it. Then someone shouted, "Lu." An Asian woman came over. After examining the girl, she reached into her white coat and pulled out a set of cards. The girl was immediately captivated. As she focused on the pictures, one of the doctors swiftly extracted the stone. It clattered into the tray. At the same instant, the cards in the woman's hand vanished, replaced by a potted African violet. The girl's eyes went wide. She tugged at the woman's sleeve, searching, but found nothing. Then she clapped her hands with delight, tugging her parents' clothes, shouting with joy. The woman handed the flower to the girl, then ushered the grateful parents out of the tent. I lifted my camera and captured the scene. The click of the shutter made her turn toward me. She looked surprised, and asked in French, "Not many Asian faces here, where are you from?" "China," I replied. Her eyes widened, and she switched to Chinese. She told me her name was Willow, a doctor stationed there with Doctors Without Borders. Thinking of what I'd just seen, I asked, "Where did you get that flower?" After all, flowers were rare in a refugee camp. She curved her lips into a light smile. "I grow them. Want to see?" I followed her back to her quarters. Inside, with scraps of styrofoam, plastic bottles, and broken tiles, she had created a tiny garden. There were African violets, agapanthus, tropical orchids, Congolese azaleas. I couldn't help but ask, "Why do you plant these?" She crossed her legs, answering as if it were obvious, "Because flowers make people happy." I was puzzled. She only smiled brighter. Tilting her head, she said, "I know what you're thinking, that food, clean water, and medicine are far more urgent. Flowers are useless, right?" I nodded. She said, "Here, everything forces people to forget what is beautiful, but happiness reminds them they're still alive, still worthy of expecting something. Where there is expectation, there is hope." Her lips curved higher. She winked at me. "So, flowers are important too." A string deep in my heart thrummed. I stared at this girl who shone like a small sun. For a moment, I couldn't look away. Chapter 19. In the entire refugee camp, only Willow and I were Chinese. So, naturally, we became allies. Contrary to her cheerful first impression, Willow was extremely serious when it came to work. She provided me with detailed accounts of casualties, shortages, and needs. I turned those numbers and stories into reports that spread to the world. My very first article brought nearly 1,000 tons of food donations to the region. At that time, Willow had discovered an unusually high death rate in the camp. She frowned, puzzled. "We've been distributing medicine all along, yet they still keep dying in groups. It doesn't make sense, unless they're not taking the medicine at all." I went through patient records and said, "I'll investigate." After countless visits, I found the truth. Almost all of the free medicine had been diverted to the black market. Drug dealers could trade a single bag of moldy cornmeal for life-saving tablets, because that bag could feed a refugee family for a month. When the report was published, it stirred an uproar in international media. The World Food Program quickly redirected supplies. The day the aid convoy arrived, the camp erupted in cheers it had never known before. We worked ourselves to exhaustion, distributing the food, drenched in sweat yet filled with joy. When I handed the last sack of potatoes to a mother cradling her baby, Willow and I collapsed against the side of a truck. She turned her head toward me. A smile lit up her entire face, making her already radiant features shine even brighter. She said, "George, thank you." I blinked in confusion. "Thank me for what?" She said, "Before you came, all I could do was watch them sink deeper into hardship. And there was so little I could actually do. But now, through you, I see the meaning of my work. You've made the world see them, and us." In that moment, my heart pounded like a drum. I could hardly breathe. I scratched my head in a panic, desperate to hide the restless storm inside me. Chapter 20. After that, we quickly grew close. Willow was well liked. Her medical skills were outstanding. She always found solutions at critical moments, and her lively spirit dissolved much of the despair that hung over the camp. I loved being around her, wherever she was. Even my interview subjects were more willing to talk. One day, I followed her to spray disinfectant around the camp to prevent cholera. Suddenly, a cry for help came from an empty tent. Pulling aside the flap, we saw a man forcing himself on a girl, ripping her clothes. My face went cold. I rushed in and kicked him off. He cursed and swung a fist at me, but Willow raised the badge on her chest and said, "If you want medical care in the future, you'd better leave right now." The man's eyes flicked to the badge. Grumbling curses, he pulled up his pants and fled. We brought the girl to the UNHCR office and asked them to relocate her to another tent. After everything was settled, Willow winked at me. "Don't be sad. You did great." I froze, shook my head. "I'm not sad." I already knew violence and crime were constant shadows in a refugee camp, but she tilted her head. "You look sad to me." I was stunned, instinctively touched my face. Suddenly she laughed, reached out, and poked my forehead. "A person's feelings," she said, "don't just show up in writing, they show on the face too." Chapter 21. She seemed to have found a new little game. After that, every time we met, she would watch me for a few seconds, then say, "Feeling good today?" or "You seem upset today." I found it helpless and funny. I couldn't help asking, "How do you actually tell?" She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, propped her chin on one hand, and said, "I have a younger sister. You two are similar in some ways, you both like to hide your emotions inside." When she mentioned family, I fell silent. I asked, "A girl alone here, aren't your family worried?" She shook her head. "We're cut off." "What?" I was stunned. She said, "Because I refused to listen to them. Their control was terrifying. From childhood they forced me to do this and that. If I argued, I'd be brutally beaten. I obeyed and studied medicine. I got into the hospital, but they weren't satisfied. They forced me to marry someone I didn't love and took a bride price. I didn't want to follow their arrangement, I just wanted to do something pure. Doctors Without Borders brought me back to the essence of being a doctor, saving lives. I love that." She sighed. "I guess I've wronged my sister a bit. When I was disobedient as a child, they had her as a backup, just in case I ran away. They'd have another to replace me. After I left, she was forced onto my old path. Although she obeys, I know she's suffering." I heard she later dated someone, but they broke them up too. It was the first time she talked about family, and it made me sad. We were silent for a while. Then she asked, "What about you? Why did you come here to be a war reporter? Aren't your family worried?" Chapter 22. Maybe because she had first opened up about her family, it felt easier for me to speak. I hesitated, then said, "My mother is dead. As for my father, I'm cut off from him too, just like you." That year, the funeral was held. Many people came, a black sea of faces. The master of ceremonies read a long eulogy. I couldn't follow it and went distracted. A butterfly flew into the morning hall and landed on my mother's portrait. Its fluttering wings made the photograph seem alive. I looked at my mother smiling and smiled too. The next moment my father slapped me to the ground. He roared, "Your mother is dead. How can you be smiling?" Everyone looked at me as if I were a monster. I burst into a wail and he slapped me again. "Don't cry. Why are you crying? If you cry again I'll throw you out and disown you." I was terrified. Tears pooled in my eyes but I bit my lip and stayed silent. In the first year after my mother's death, my father would sit up half the nights going through her letters and photos. The next year he boxed her things up and shoved them into a corner to gather dust. The third year he remarried. The new woman threw the boxes into the yard and threatened to burn them clean. I clawed out that camera and hugged it to my chest, burning my skin to protect it. From then on, that camera was my mother's only keepsake. Later, my little brother was born. All the family's love and energy went to him. I grew up like an invisible person until I turned 18. I went to university and studied journalism. On the day I left, my father handed me a thick wad of cash and tossed it at me. "You're grown, don't come back." I took it. It was 30,000. 30,000 bought out our blood ties. At university, teachers and classmates all said I was suited to be a reporter, because no matter what happened, I stayed expressionless. When I became a war correspondent, that became an advantage. They admired my composure. But only I knew I didn't dare have emotions. I seemed to believe, if I hadn't made my father angry at the morning hall that day, would he have abandoned me? I got used to suppressing all feelings, afraid that if I laughed freely or shed real tears again, I would lose more. Saying this, I exhaled softly. It was the first time I'd unburdened these years to anyone. Willow frowned slightly. Her usual smiling mouth drooped. Her eyes reddened. "George, haven't you forgotten, you were only 5 then?" she said. I blinked, confused. "What?" She pressed her lips together and said, "Crying and laughing loudly are a child's right. You've been suppressing yourself because you were forced to grow up." Chapter 23. I froze. It felt like a heavy club struck my skull. So that was it. For a long time after the funeral, my father didn't speak to me. Then my little brother was born, and my needs were always pushed behind his. At university I had to finish my studies and support myself. It seemed I never had a childhood, because there was no one to rely on. I learned that my cries and laughter would go unanswered. Might as well hide them in my heart. I sighed. Bitter. "Maybe," I said. "Who knows? But it doesn't matter. At my age now I can't act like a child, laughing or crying whenever I feel like it." The next moment she suddenly leaned in, looking at me with pity. "Yes, you're a man. A real man. You're not like other kids." I nodded, somewhat accepting it. She grabbed my arm, eyes full of admiration. "Maturity shows itself as steadiness and reason. Just like you." I forced a small "hm." She tilted her head and added, "No wonder you're my favorite little George." My heart skipped. I asked, disbelieving, "Really? Really?" She said, "Every time I see you I feel so happy I want to reward you, a little kiss." My throat tightened. The corner of my mouth lifted. Then she stood on tiptoe and looped her arm around my neck. My heart missed a beat. She wore a playful smile. "Be good, close your eyes." I obediently shut them. But after a while nothing happened. I peeped one eye open and saw her hold out her palm. In it sat a candy. She beamed. "Here, your reward, little one." I stood there stunned for a long time, unwrapped the paper and popped it in my mouth. It tasted awful, cheap artificial fruit flavor. cloyingly sweet. It was the taste of childhood, and it made my eyes burn. Willow hugged me and whispered, "It's okay, I know you're sad." The warm embrace finally broke down my last defenses. I could not hold back anymore. The feelings that had been forced down since I was 5 erupted after 20 years. In the end, I don't know when I fell asleep, somewhere on Willow's bed. Chapter 24. When I woke the next morning, I was still holding Willow. Recalling last night, I panicked and tried to slip away, but she reached out and stopped me. "Where are you going?" she asked. I scratched my head awkwardly, fumbling for words. She, however, acted like nothing had happened, squinted playfully and said, "You're embarrassed? What's there to be embarrassed about?" She leaned close, smiling. "Remember what happened yesterday, never forget it." I shook my head in denial. She frowned. "You don't understand." I was baffled. "George," she said, "I confessed to you yesterday." I froze completely. She rose and threw open the curtains. Sunlight poured in and dispelled the darkness in an instant. Bathed in the bright light, she tied her hair back and said, "Oh, by the way, I forgot to say yesterday, your mother was really cool. When we get back, let's go see her." My head swam. How could she be so unpredictable? Using childhood psychology on me now, was she? Warmth kept flowing from her hands into mine. Dazed, I managed only, "Okay." She leapt into my arms, hugging me tightly. In that moment I silently wished to whatever gods might be listening that our time together would last longer, longer still. Even if it was only a dream, I hoped never to wake. Chapter 25. I fell in love with Willow, but because of work, we were both too busy. We didn't have many days to meet. Most of the time, we crossed paths in places of conflict. She rushed to treat the wounded, while I desperately filmed footage for the reports. The brief brush of our hands as we passed by, that was the only exchange between us, and the internet signal was unstable. Often, we wouldn't receive each other's messages for days. Then suddenly, they would flood into our phones all at once. The notifications dinging non-stop, arriving out of order, as if they had also just survived a hail of bullets and gunfire. Carrying the heavy weight of longing, stubbornly delivering what our hearts wanted to say. But the situation in the northern province was grim. Our first quarrel was on the day a nearby village was attacked. When we arrived at the scene, the armed men hadn't fully withdrawn. The security forces clashed with them. We hurried back to the vehicle, preparing to retreat, but then I saw Willow jump out of the ambulance again. At the edge of the firefight, a villager had fallen. I quickly followed her, and together we carried the men back. I was furious, and we argued fiercely, but she stood her ground. She said, "I'm a doctor, I can't just watch someone die. He'd only been shot in the leg. He could still live, but if I didn't save him, under that crossfire he would have been as good as dead." I knew she was right. I knew saving people was her mission, but I panicked. While rescuing him, shrapnel grazed her left shoulder. Her arm was covered in blood. I couldn't even tell if it was hers. I trembled as I checked again and again, only to find it was just a surface wound. I didn't want to argue anymore. I held her tightly and said in a hoarse voice, "Willow, I don't want to lose anyone else." She fell quiet. After a while, her voice choked as she said, "I'm sorry, I promise. From now on I'll be careful. I won't put myself in danger. I won't make you worry." I let out a deep sigh but stayed silent. She gave a faint smile and said, "Then let's pinky swear." "Okay." She reached out her hand, making the gesture. She said, "Two hands hooked, never change for 100 years. If one breaks the promise, they turn into a puppy." Then she added with a laugh, "I absolutely can't turn into a puppy. Otherwise, how could I introduce myself when I meet your mom?" "Hello, Auntie. My name is Dog Lou." Her words left me speechless. I could only pinch her cheek helplessly, but inside, my heart sank. Everyone knows, a pinky swear is just a psychological comfort. The battlefield is the cruelest place. For the first time, I deeply realized that every single day with Willow was priceless, because no one could ever tell whether death or tomorrow would arrive first. Chapter 26. As the fighting grew more frequent, Ebola began attacking this already battered country. By spring, Willow was even busier. Because medical staff were scarce, she started running between the refugee camps and the treatment centers. Then armed men suddenly launched attacks on treatment centers in multiple cities. Many doctors had to abandon their work and evacuate, but Willow refused to leave. On one hand, the situation here was still relatively stable. On the other, the center still had nearly 100 patients. If everyone left, those people would only lie in their beds and wait to die. She and 4 other doctors stayed behind and adapted as best they could. But it wasn't long before the militants occupied the suburbs and cut off the roads in and out. We were trapped. In that situation, Willow suddenly messaged me and asked me to come to the treatment center. She was vague, but I had a bad feeling. We put on protective suits and entered the medical waste disposal area. In an emptied room, I saw more than a dozen children. They had escaped down from the mountains. The oldest was only 12. Their clothes were in tatters and their bodies covered in already infected wounds. I could hardly believe my eyes. The militants who had occupied the suburbs were from the She group. They had a blood feud with the Who. If those children were discovered, the entire treatment center could be destroyed in an instant. I felt like I was collapsing. I asked, Willow, are you crazy? Do you even remember the principle of Doctors Without Borders? She shouldn't have directly intervened in the fighting if she wanted to help the most people, but she only hung her head and said, aggrieved. I know this is dangerous, so I only wanted to ask if you could contact some organization that can take them in. I rubbed my temples and said, but so many of them, how are you going to get them out? There are patrols everywhere outside. Willow spoke fast. She nodded and said, they're small. They can put on protective suits and crawl into the dumpsters used for medical waste. The transport truck comes every 3 days. No one opens those dumpsters. As long as we can make sure there's someone to receive them afterward, we can save them. Her bold plan stunned me. She clenched her hands and said, George, I'm a person first, then a doctor, and only after that am I a Doctor Without Borders. I can't just throw them out to die. Chapter 27. My head was pounding. Reason and emotion were fighting like mad. The children watched our heated argument with hopeless expressions. The smallest ones huddled tightly together, their fingers knotted, as if waiting for fate's final verdict. I almost immediately relented. They had already done everything they could to escape hell. We couldn't send them back. I took a deep breath and calmed down. I said slowly, word by word, all right, I'll help you. Then I added, but I won't just help contact someone to receive them. I'll personally get them all out of here. Willow froze and immediately refused. No, it's too dangerous here. I smiled and repeated, yes, it's dangerous. Willow pressed her lips together and stayed silent. I said, if you don't agree, I'll go out now and tell them there are children hidden here. She snapped, we never should have involved you. I shrugged, too late, you've already dragged me in. Willow sulked and turned away, refusing to speak to me. I sighed, lifted her chin and forced her to look at me. I took a deep breath and said, at worst, we can die together. She instantly protested, flustered, ugh, don't say that, no way that will happen. I stroked her face and said, yeah, of course not. After all, you promised me, you still have to come back with me to meet my mother. Chapter 28. I had to admit, Willow's plan was almost flawless. No one wanted to touch the medical waste from Ebola patients, and no one would imagine that people could be hidden inside. Each time, we could send out 2 children. On the way, the transport truck would stop once, where members of a humanitarian organization would take the children away. Half a month later, only 2 were left. They were the oldest, a brother and sister. The brother was named Omar, the sister Layla. On the day the truck was to take them, Willow was in high spirits. Once again she said to me, thank you, George. I didn't reply, just held her hand tightly. We could almost see the light of victory. We even celebrated in advance. The 2 children performed a traditional dance for us. Willow cooked them a meal that, in this place, counted as a feast, and I took many photos of them. When night fell, they started putting on the protective suits. Layla handed me a marker and asked, can you write your names on these? Willow and I were surprised, but still signed our names. I thought for a moment and added, I hope you grow up well. Willow wrote, I hope you reunite with your family. I added, I hope the war ends soon. Willow wrote, I hope we can meet again in the future. We filled their suits with blessings. By the end, everyone was in tears. They threw themselves into our arms. Their muffled voices came from under the protective suits. We'll remember you forever and ever. Thank you, you are great heroes. Chapter 29. In the middle of the night, the truck drove into the center. As usual, we placed the children into the dumpster and loaded it onto the truck. But right after everything was done, gunshots rang out in the main hall of the center. Willow and I froze. The militants had broken in, saying they'd received word that children were being hidden here. I pretended to stay focused on my work, listening to them violently kick doors open, searching every corner of every room. My heart pounded so hard it almost burst. They ransacked the place, finding nothing. After threatening us a few times, they were about to leave, when suddenly someone outside shouted that he had just seen the departing truck. The militants rushed out immediately. The last one leaving cursed aloud, and then I heard Willow shout, "Grenade!" I turned my head in a daze. Life and death hung on a single instant. Everything stretched into slow motion before my eyes. I saw the grenade arc slowly downward. I saw the other doctors' faces, frozen in terror, and I saw Willow running toward me. In the moment before the blast, she threw herself over me. Chapter 30. There was a bang, and then time snapped back into place. I was slammed to the ground as if by a scorching giant hand. I spat out a mouthful of blood. My insides felt like they'd been thrown out of place. Thick smoke rose everywhere. I couldn't see clearly, Something wet ran down my face. I touched it, my whole palm was covered in blood. Willow had been blown away, lying on her side not far from me. I tried to get up but couldn't steady myself. I could only crawl over on trembling knees and check her breathing with shaking hands. Thank God, she was still alive. Somewhere, more gunfire erupted. I scooped her into my arms and started running for the exit. But people with guns were everywhere. I had to turn sharply and plunge into the woods. We ran for who knows how long until my legs went numb and lost feeling. I could no longer keep going and collapsed to the ground. Willow woke at that moment. She struggled to sit up and help me, but she couldn't move her body. Weakly she said, "George, you go first." I couldn't stop sobbing and dragged myself back up anyway. Furious. "No," I grit out. "We go together." She pushed my hand away. "You go. Find someone. Come back for me. 2 people won't get away." I broke down. "Willow, we made a promise. You can't die. If you die, I'll haunt you even as a ghost." She pressed her lips and smiled, then choked on the blood in her mouth and coughed. She said, I'm not lying to you. The liar is the puppy." I painfully pulled myself up and propped her against a tree, tears running uncontrollably. She kissed my cheek and said, "Go. You won't let me die, right?" My voice was hoarse. "You must wait for me. I'll come back for you. You'll be fine." She smiled and waved weakly. "Okay," she said. Chapter 31. I turned to continue fleeing. The next second, a thunderous shot rang out behind me. Something threw me to the ground. My breath stopped. I'd been hit. I turned in terror and saw Willow fall beside me. There was a through-and-through wound in her chest. Her white coat was soaked red and blood was pouring from her mouth. My mind went blank. Ignoring my own injuries, I forced myself over her. "Willow, Willow." I pressed at her wound in vain. Utterly panicked, I muttered, Stop the bleeding. Must stop the bleeding first." But she lightly gripped my hand. A simple motion that seemed to consume all her strength. Tears streamed down her face. "Sorry. I love you. In the next life, I'll find you again." Her eyes held a tangle of feelings: reluctance, pity, resignation. Then the light faded from them. Her hand slipped from mine lifelessly to the side. I stood there stunned. A huge wave of disorientation and rage hit me. It felt like my heart was being burned. I coughed up another great mouthful of blood. My vision blurred and cold sweat poured out. The adrenaline faded and the searing pain in my shoulder made me see stars. I still wanted to hold her, furious at this sudden, final death, calling, "Willow." But my body was at the limit. I fell backward, and everything went black. Chapter 32. When I woke again, the faint smell of disinfectant hovered at the tip of my nose. I had been transferred to a hospital back home. The doctor said I'd been in the ICU for 2 whole weeks. My internal organs were severely bruised and I'd been shot in the shoulder. But by some cruel mercy, my spleen hadn't ruptured and the bullet hadn't passed all the way through. I hadn't bled out badly, so I survived until help arrived. I knew very clearly it was because of Willow. She had saved my life. I asked everyone I could contact about her whereabouts, but they all told me the scene had been too chaotic. Willow's body hadn't been found, and because the casualty numbers rose, Doctors Without Borders had suspended its project in the northern province. No one could continue searching for her, and so Willow vanished. I woke up from nightmares night after night. Her image before death replayed endlessly in my head. The doctors diagnosed me with PTSD. I started taking medication, doing therapy, even drinking myself under the table. None of it helped. Everyone suggested I try a new life, stop clinging to the past, and move forward. But how could I move on? She died because of me. That thought lingered relentlessly, making me hate that I was still alive. Hate that she had died instead of me. I hated that the world couldn't give her a proper ending. I stood on rooftops countless times, ready to chase after her. Yet at the last moment I always pulled myself back. This was a life Willow had risked everything to save. I had long since lost the right to give up. Chapter 33. I took 6 months of medical leave. When I returned to the TV station, I couldn't face the cameras and photos anymore. So I applied to be transferred to a behind-the-scenes role. But as time passed, I kept walking through life like a walking corpse, without vitality. My colleagues couldn't bear it and tried to get me to meet new people, dragging me to blind dates. I had no interest and planned to give a few polite words and leave. Then I met Freya. When I saw that face, so like Willow's, I froze. It took everything I had to suppress my emotions. Later I learned she was the sister Willow had mentioned. At first, being with her was genuinely comforting. Those ordinary days were so sweet and tempting. After work I could see her every day. On days off we could curl up on the couch and watch movies together. On nights when nightmares woke me, seeing her sleeping quietly beside me let me finally drop my guard and sleep deeply. These were things Willow and I had never had. I indulged and lost myself, almost fooling even myself. Wouldn't it be nice if this was her, living out a quiet life? But every dream must end. They were not the same person. Willow promised to come home with me to meet my mother, How could she have given her camera to someone else? She saved my life. How could she then bear no burden while enjoying one-sided giving? She said she found meaning in me. How could she see me as just a steady, honest tool to take care of everything for her? I regretted it. Her bones were still scarcely cold, and I was hiding from reality, living a life of self-deception with her shadow. How could I treat her like that? So I had to leave. I had to go find her. I should have gone earlier. I would go back myself and bring her home. Chapter 34. Back to the refugee camp. I saw Willow's colleagues. Now, Doctors Without Borders had returned. Her former partner, Hassan, had now been promoted to coordinator of the entire project. When we met for the first time, before a word was spoken, tears rolled down. I told him I had come back to look for Willow. He took me to the warehouse. Inside, there were still some of Willow's belongings. He said, the evacuation was rushed back then, and many things weren't sorted out. In that box, there was a deck of cards, a packet of flower seeds, a string of keys, a few medical books, a stethoscope. All were trivial items. Yet each one was closely tied to her. It felt as if I had returned to 3 years ago. One afternoon, when I pushed open the door to her dorm room, I saw her sitting on a chair reading, twirling a pen in her hand. When she saw me, her brows lifted, her eyes smiled, and she said, "You're here." Hassan too seemed lost in melancholy. He said, "These things should have been dealt with long ago, but I thought, maybe one day you would return to collect them for her. So I kept them. I didn't expect the day would really come. I accepted them with solemnity." Hassan, thank you. I was the one who came too late. After that, I told him I still wanted to look for the children from back then. He promised he would keep an eye out for me, but after so many years, he told me not to hold too much hope. When everything was done, I returned to the dormitory. I found messages from my colleagues. They said Freya had come looking for me. Chapter 35. On the wedding day, I didn't show up. Her parents were furious. She searched everywhere for me. Only after asking my colleagues did she learn that I had already come here. She refused to believe it, made a scene at the TV station, and almost got taken away by the police. I sighed. I couldn't understand. Since she already had someone else she loved, then what did I have to do with her anymore? But not wanting to make things harder for my colleagues, I still called Freya on video. The second the call connected, my breath stalled. On the screen, her whole face was dirty and pale. "George? Is it really you?" She stared blankly at me, rubbing her eyes again and again. She snapped, "You really are something." Then she suddenly scoffed coldly. "So just because of a few words from Makoto, you really ran off to Africa? Are you out of your mind?" In that instant, anger flared in me. Contacting her at all really was insane. Just as I was about to hang up, I saw big tears rolling down her cheeks. She choked. "How could you treat your own life like a joke? How could you make me worry about you like this?" I suddenly felt it absurd. I asked, baffled. "You worry about me?" "Our whole relationship began with you using me to deal with your parents, and me using you as a substitute to ease my loneliness, without a shred of genuine feeling." She hysterically screamed over me, shouting, "You're lying. Do you even know? That day at the dinner, when I went out to find Makoto, all I could think about was you, wondering how you could drive after drinking so much. Your camera broke. I asked so many people, went to every camera shop in the city, and they all said it was too old, no longer available. I begged friends abroad for help, finally found it, then flew there myself to bring it back to you. Then you just disappeared without a word. They said you went to Congo. I looked it up online, and was so terrified I couldn't sleep at night. You made me fall in love with you, and then abandoned me. How could you do that?" She wept bitterly. "Please, come back, okay?" She raised her hand, showing me the ring I had thrown away on her finger. Speaking in a pitiful tone, we stared at each other for a long time. Finally, I suddenly laughed. I said, "Freya, you never even truly understood me. How can you talk about love?" I said, "Makoto is nothing, and you are nothing. Do you really think I'd go abroad just because of a word from either of you? I came back only because the person I love is here." Her pupils shrank, and in pain she swept everything off the table. She shrieked, "Who is she? Who is she?" I coldly hung up the call. I said, "You don't need to know." Chapter 36. I restarted my work as a journalist. After 3 years, the situation here had become even worse than before. The areas under control of the armed groups had expanded to an unprecedented level. Food crises, cholera outbreaks, sexual violence, and kidnappings happened one after another. This place seemed to have truly become a land forsaken by God. Every day I witnessed scenes as if from hell, and I would think, does anything we do here really have meaning? For me, it felt as though I was only recording the endless cycle of tragedy. The world could see the suffering here, but then what? And for Doctors Without Borders, was their treatment truly extending hope, or only prolonging pain? No one could say for sure whether surviving in such a place was fortune or misfortune. A few months later, Hassan told me he had found 5 of those children. Among them were Omar and Layla. That day, they had managed to escape. Later, they reunited with their relatives, and now they lived with family members. The news was uplifting. I rushed to see them. As soon as the car arrived at the place we had agreed to meet, Layla came running. She threw herself into my arms, eyes brimming with tears. You finally came. She had grown taller, blossoming into a young lady. She anxiously looked into the car, asking me, "Where's the doctor? Why didn't she come with you?" I paused and said, "She had other things to do." Layla instantly twisted her fingers tightly together. She asked, "Did something happen to her?" Children who have faced death become acutely sensitive to ambiguous words like these. I firmly shook my head. I said, "No, she's fine. Let me show you." I searched through my phone, but I realized I didn't have any photos of Willow, because I hadn't dared to look at them. After returning home, I had sealed them all away inside my computer. In the end, I only found one photo of Freya. She was dressed in white, reading medical records under the dim, warm glow of a desk lamp, and she looked so very much like Willow. Layla saw the picture. At last, she believed me. She jumped up and down with joy, pulling on her brother, saying, "One day, I'm going to be a doctor too." The other children chimed in, "Me too. I want to heal the sick and save lives." I patted their heads and turned to the boy who had stayed silent all along. "And you, Omar, what do you want to be?" Omar glanced at the camera hanging from my chest, embarrassed, and said, "I want to be a journalist." I froze. He continued, "I want to be like you, letting the world see the people who are suffering. If they can be seen, maybe someone will be willing to reach out a helping hand. If Willow were still here, she would surely be glad." The seeds we had unknowingly sown were now sprouting. Before leaving, I gave Omar my compact camera, and gave Willow's stethoscope and books to Layla and the other children. Their cheeks flushed with excitement. Even as the car drove away, they stood at the roadside, waving with all their strength, their smiles radiant. I thought, maybe it really does have meaning after all. An individual's power is small, incapable of shaking the larger reality, but it can still ignite someone else's hope for the future. These children, living in ravines, still long to lift a bright tomorrow with their scarred bodies. Just as Willow once said, "Where there is expectation, there is hope." A few more months passed. My plan to find Willow's remains yielded nothing. I went to that forest many times, but since it had been night back then, I had no idea which direction I had run. In the end, I could only give up. I began sorting through old photos. Piece by piece, I recorded Willow's story on my Instagram. Many details, after 3 years, had already grown blurry. At first, I only did this out of fear that with time, I would forget even more. But unexpectedly, the posts went viral. Countless comments poured in, people wanting to know more of her story. Someone wrote, "Chinese people must have farming genes carved into their bones. No matter where they are, they can always make a garden." One of her former patients recognized her, commenting, "Dr. Lu was really wonderful." My mother was already a bit confused from illness, but every time she spoke with her, she was never impatient. From those comments, I pieced together an image of her in the days before we had ever met. Not long after, I received a video call from Freya. She had sent me a screenshot of my Instagram and asked, "Is this you?" I admitted it openly. Yes. Her eyes were bitter as she said, "So the one you meant was my sister." "That's right," she whispered. "I should have realized long ago. No wonder you always looked at my face like that. I thought you really loved me." She lowered her head in loneliness. She asked, "My sister, is she doing well now?" I hadn't yet written the later parts of the story, so she didn't know. I answered coldly, "No, she isn't. She died 3 years ago." The phone slipped from Freya's hand, crashing heavily onto the floor. After a long while, the screen finally flickered back. She was nearly collapsing. Freya choked. "She's dead. Why didn't I know? Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "What do you think?" I sneered. "All these years, has anyone in your family ever cared about her?" Freya trembled violently, too guilty to meet my eyes. I remembered the first time I met her parents, when I cautiously asked if she had any siblings. Her parents waved dismissively, "No," and Freya herself had said, "I used to have one, but just consider her dead." When I asked what she meant, she lashed out at me uncharacteristically, snapping, "In this house, her name must never be mentioned." She hated Willow, hated her for escaping that home and leaving her as the new victim. Her parents hated Willow even more, hated that she was their child, yet beyond their control. So how could I ever tell them? I raised my head and said, "Stop pretending to be pitiful. Who are you acting for? Do you think she ended up in a place like this for no reason? It was all because of you." Freya hung up in panic. Chapter 37. A few days later, Freya's parents came after me. They said Freya had gone missing. Only then did I learn that on that day Freya had rushed home and smashed the house clean. She said it was all her parents' fault. If they hadn't pushed Willow away, she wouldn't have left home, wouldn't have met me, and she wouldn't have died, and Freya wouldn't have, out of repression, fallen for the rebellious Makoto and ended up where we are now. Everything in between was a chain of cause and effect. There was no solution. After that, Freya handed in her resignation at the hospital and disappeared. The two parents, both over 50, cried and screamed as if they were being ripped apart. How can we be blamed for Willow? As parents, we only wanted our daughter to marry well. What's wrong with that? If only she had stayed obediently at the hospital and married into a good family like we said, she wouldn't have ended up like this. It's all her own doing. How can Freya sulk at us over something like this? After all, we're still her parents. We beg you, please bring her back. We've already lost one daughter, don't let us lose another. I could not bear it, I snapped. Enraged. Get out. You don't deserve to be parents. I felt awful. Wandering around, I ended up back in that patch of woods. I sat beneath a big tree and stared at the mottled patches of light on the ground, hugging my knees tight. Although Willow had only spoken to me that one time, I could guess how much she must have suffered at home. Her emergency contact in the Doctors Without Borders records had first been her partner. Later it became me. She never wanted her family to know if anything happened to her, and yet from that tattered, broken home grew someone as gentle and kind as she was. Thinking that made me sad all over again. Chapter 38. A gust of wind blew through. Something hard fell from the tree and struck my forehead dead on. I howled and gasped. When I picked it up I saw it was a tag, an identification tag. People who work and live in war zones often carry these so they can be identified if they die in an accident. I thought it belonged to some soldier who had left it behind, but when I turned it over, the front was engraved, Willow Lou. I leapt to my feet, running my fingers over the letters again and again. How could this be? How could her tag be here? I looked around. Only then did I notice that the tree I'd been leaning against was different from the others. It towered above the rest, its leaves rippling a dark green, and the soil around its roots was blackened. As I stared, something clicked into place. I began tearing at the earth with my hands like a madman, my fingernails filled with dirt and blood. I dug and dug until a white bone showed. At that moment I broke into uncontrollable sobs. I fetched tools and unearthed what the roots had wound around. In the soil I found fragments of the white coat she'd worn that day. It was Willow. I had found her. Finally, I had found her. She had likely been buried hastily where she fell, and by coincidence the tag had been embraced and grown over by the big tree until it was revealed again. Today, as I sat under that tree, it fell. It was as if she had seen me mourning and had given my forehead a sharp poke to tell me, cheer up, don't waste yourself on a life that isn't worth it. All that's over now. I clutched her skull tightly and, trembling, said, all right, let's go home. Let's go home. Chapter 39. I applied for leave and brought her ashes back to our country, burying them beside my mother, since her real family never wanted her. Then I would be her family. On the day of the burial, I saw Freya. She had grown much thinner, and in her hands she carried 2 bouquets of white chrysanthemums. She placed them before my mother's grave and Willow's. She said she already knew everything. She showed me a video of an apology posted online. It was from Makoto. He apologized to me and to the others he had deceived. He confessed that he had never gone traveling around the world. He had been in Beijing all along. He thought such a persona would keep Freya obsessed with him. So he lied to everyone, and the reason he had spoken so harshly to me was simply jealousy, that I was really about to marry Freya. After watching the video, Freya called Makoto in front of me. He spoke anxiously. Freya, I already apologized like you asked. I'm being cursed out by everyone, shouldn't you forgive me now? And that thing you said about being willing to marry me, that's true, right? Freya replied coldly. No, I will not marry you. You deceived me, and I deceived you. We owe each other nothing. I made you apologize only because you wronged George. From now on, let's never see each other again. She hung up, blocked him, and then turned to me, apologizing. The camera. I'm sorry, I didn't know it was your mother's keepsake. I gave a cold laugh and said, you don't need to apologize, because I will never forgive you. The damage done was beyond repair. What use was a powerless apology? Her expression dimmed. She added, I also wronged my sister. When she first left, she tried to contact me many times, but each time I blamed her, scolded her. In my heart I knew that it wasn't her fault our parents forced me to break up with Makoto, but I didn't have the courage to run away, and I envied her. She stared blankly at Willow's tombstone. She said, if I hadn't been such a coward, if I had gone with her back then, would I have had the chance to meet you too? I only replied calmly, there's no medicine for regret in this world. Hypotheticals mean nothing. I loved Willow. That's all there is. She stood, sighing lightly. She said, maybe one day, I'll join Doctors Without Borders too, to make up for my regrets. I frowned. I had wanted to say, do whatever you like. It's your own choice. But then another thought struck me. I said. Someone once said, her younger sister didn't really want to be a doctor. She hoped that person would truly think about what kind of person she wanted to be. Freya froze. As if caught in memories of the past, her eyes reddening completely. I picked up the 2 bouquets. I said. Neither of them liked white chrysanthemums. Don't bring them again. I tossed the flowers back to Freya and turned to leave. We were like 2 small boats swept along by a raging current, after a brief stretch of sailing in the same direction. We each drifted away, pulled toward opposite shores. Chapter 40. When I walked out of the cemetery, I saw an unexpected person, my father, but on second thought, it made sense. Freya must have gone to see him. That's how she'd have known the camera belonged to my mother. So he knew I had returned. He had grown old, bent over, trembling slightly in the wind. He asked me in a somewhat ingratiating way. Have you eaten? I was impatient. Spit it out. What do you want from me? He nervously rubbed his hands together. Could you come home for a while? He asked. I said. Didn't you tell me when I was little, don't come back when you grow up? Haven't I been doing exactly what you wanted? Staying away and making a life for myself. Now you want me to go home? He said. Your brother is ill. Cancer. I was stunned for a moment. He continued. I can't do it. We've sold everything that could be sold. You're his brother. Can you help him? His face was full of worry. I know you resent me. He added. But I didn't want to drive you away. You are my blood. How could I bear it? I had my reasons. I said. I know. He stared at me blankly. The day I received my acceptance letter, I was overjoyed. I could carry on my mother's wishes, study journalism and become a reporter. I rushed home to tell my father the good news, only to hear him arguing with my aunt in the kitchen. She said, in a few years Victor will go to university too. How can this family afford him? You raised him to adulthood. Isn't that enough? Diego, think this through. This house can have him without me, or have me without him. I quietly closed the door again and ran out to sit by the street for an entire afternoon. That whole summer I lived in dread, waiting for the final verdict. When the admissions were announced, my heart finally fell, and was utterly shattered. I said expressionlessly, you didn't want the home you'd barely rebuilt to collapse again. So you chose to sacrifice me. No matter how unwilling, you still drove me away. He tried to say something, but I cut him off. I understand you, of course, but only understand. So I choose to stand on my own side. You should understand, too, to me, you are an incompetent, unfit father. I took out my phone and checked my bank balance. Over the years he'd sent money to my account sporadically. So far it totaled a bit over $320,000. I said, maybe you still fantasize that I'll at least return the money you gave me. But I took that money with a clear conscience. It's what you owe me, and what I deserve. I added, from now on, don't come looking for me again. Chapter 41. After leaving the restaurant, I suddenly felt an immense lightness. The burdens that had weighed on my heart one by one dissolved like smoke. I turned my steps toward the flower shop where Willow had once bought a bird of paradise for my mother. The shopkeeper recognized me, but the shop was nearly empty. She was loading the remaining empty pots onto a truck. I asked, where are you moving them to? She smiled. We're closing. I want to do something else. I paused for a moment and said, that's fine. Using the leftover lily of the valley, hyacinth, and olive branches in the shop, she wrapped a small bouquet for me. She said, may we both embrace new lives. We exchanged a hug, reluctant to let go. On the way home, the sunset spread like clouds of color, the evening light gilding everything. I stopped to admire it for a while. Suddenly I received a call from the station director. His tone was anxious. George, your leave may have to end early. I asked, what happened? He sent me a news alert. Conflict escalates, explosions reported in multiple locations. He said, the station thinks you have more experience. I cut him off. I'll go. I pulled out the identification tag necklace engraved with Willow's name from beneath my collar and kissed it lightly. I thought, there can be no other answer. Wherever the smoke of war rises, that is where we must go. We always hope that for everyone in this world, no matter how deep the darkness, there will still be stars to find. Extra Chapter 1. George's diary concluded online. Countless netizens cried over Willow's fate. They spontaneously visited the cemetery to pay their respects. Even her parents, who had once refused to acknowledge their daughter, appeared in the media to speak of what a kind, selfless person she had been. But soon people dug up their past behavior. They were instantly reviled. Anonymous wreaths filled up the stairwell of their building. In the end, they moved out in the middle of the night in disgrace. No one knows where they went. Chapter 2. Willow was posthumously honored by the UN Refugee Agency with the Refugee Award, in recognition of her outstanding contributions to protecting and helping refugees. Chapter 3. Freya did not join Doctors Without Borders. She bought the flower shop beside the cemetery. George's words that day had reminded her of swinging in the yard with her sister when they were children. Back then her sister had asked what she wanted to do in the future. She had said she wanted to run a big flower shop. That memory had been lost over time. Every year, no matter how busy, George would find time to visit the cemetery to pay respects to my mother and to Willow. Those visits were the only days when Freya could see him again. At other times she could only watch his footsteps span the war-torn regions of the Middle East and Eastern Europe. She counted the days devoutly, looking forward to every meeting with him. Although George paid her no mind, she felt that being able to see him again was enough. Chapter 4. Makoto was socially ruined. Even former friends cut ties with him, calling him a liar who fabricated his past and had bad intentions. With nowhere left to turn, he went to find Freya, only to discover that her eyes contained nothing but George. He had turned himself into a complete clown. Chapter 5. 2 years later, George's brother passed away from his illness. His stepmother had already cost him the family. Now he had lost his son as well. She and George's father divorced. Diego's family fell apart again. This time he no longer even had a son by his side. Not long after, he died. Chapter 6. George continued supporting the children they had helped rescue. In the end, Omar and Layla did become a journalist and a doctor. Many years later, George won the Pulitzer Prize for journalism. In his acceptance speech he said, "If you cannot stop the war, then tell the world the truth about it, be the world's eyes."